Good morning. This is Tracy Hales-Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE. Today, I have the pleasure to talk to Dawn Morgan, writing as Dawn Travis and Mark Wilder. And you're calling from Albuquerque?
From Albuquerque, New Mexico, the beautiful city by the Rio Grande.
Well, I'm really glad to talk to you. And I did enjoy the books you wrote, the B.J. Vinson mystery stories.
Thank you.
Really well written. The characters are very well developed, and I got to know them well. Why don't you give our audience a little bit of an idea of the basic premise of the books?
The basic premise of the books are that this currently confidential investigator who born and grew up in New Mexico, became a football player, became a U.S. Marine Corps MP, and came out of the Marine Corps and went to the Albuquerque Police Department, where he became a detective and worked with a fellow who is now a lieutenant in the Albuquerque Police Department named Gene Enriquez. They have a good working relationship. These are not books where the protagonist constantly fights the authorities. To the opposite, they do a great deal of cooperation within the limits of the law. But I kind of wanted a detective who was a little different. So BJ said, okay, then I'm gay. And lo and behold, he became gay. And if anyone disbelieves what I just said, then they're not writers.
Right.
because your characters do tell you a great deal about themselves.
They certainly do. You can't force them to be anything they're not.
No, they will sometimes rear up and say, no way, Buster. You better go back and do that again.
It's really true.
It is.
So
non-writers do not understand that.
I don't think they do. So BJ actually was shot as a patrol officer or as a detective. That was kind of the impetus that made him become the confidential investigator.
Right. He was injured in the thigh by a gunshot wound when he and Gene were apprehending a murder suspect. And he bled badly and almost lost his life. When he recovered from it, he took a medical retirement from the police department and had nothing to do with himself, so he did what he always had done, became an investigator. He doesn't like the word PI, or private investigator. He prefers confidential investigator. Maybe a little snobbishness on his part.
That's okay, I like it. And he's got an office with Hazel is quite a character, his secretary.
I kind of drew her from the old sassy old maid in the cartoons called Hazel. I don't know how many people remember, but that's who I imagined when I came up with Hazel.
I know her well. And so we see B.J. Vinson going through several books here, solving mysteries, and each one starts off as a mystery, a murder mystery, but then it gets more and more complicated. Vinson, it's up to him to try and untangle the threads of this.
I don't like mysteries, which when I'm reading someone else's mystery, I know within the first few pages who did it, unless it's a whodunit instead of a whodunit, and there are some of those around. So I try to throw a few curves here, there, and yon, and sometimes go overboard, and those who I rely upon to kind of critique my work call me to task on it, so hopefully I don't overdo it. But I do like curlicues now and then in the plot.
Well, you've done them well.
I don't use a plot arc that is a conscious plot arc like a lot of writers do. I just start writing. I don't outline. I'm a seat-of-the-pants writer. I know where I want to end up. I know where I want to start, and then I meander until I get where I'm aiming. And so sometimes I have to make sure go back and try to make sure that my books don't kind of bog down in the middle, which
Right.
is a typical problem for authors.
It is. So let me ask you this. In your whodunits, do you know who done it before you're finished?
It's strange that you should ask that. When I have now finished my sixth B.J. Vinson book called, the last one is called The Vox Leitner Scandal. And on every one of them up until this point, I knew exactly who the murderer was.
Mm-hmm.
And on this one, I thought I did, but believe it or not, it changed toward the end of the story.
Isn't that funny how that can happen? It's the same way our characters identify themselves.
Right.
The story.
But it made for a better story.
Absolutely.
It made for a better.
So you have 6 of the B.J. Vincent books, and you have other books under Donald Morgan, right?
I only have one book published under my own name. I've got 6 of them written, but I've not concentrated on trying to get them published because BJ's been keeping me busy.
I can see why.
But I wrote for 40 years on my first novel,
Wow.
40 years, and fell in love with the story, and it ended up as 242,000 words.
Oh, my.
Now, this is back when I started writing this. This was back in the days of House Divided and books like that, which ran 1,000 published pages. Well, nobody in today's market will even look at a book that long.
That's true.
So I went to work on it. Nobody would touch it. I went to work on it. I got it down to something like 124,000 words and self-published as an ebook.
Oh, there you go. 40 years. Well, that's okay. You stuck with it.
That one's called the Eagle's Claw.
The Eagle's Claw. Beautiful pictures on your website, too, accompany that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
But it sounds like Vinson is the guy you're sticking with at the moment.
Yeah, he keeps me busy. I've got, after futzing around with some others, I finally found a very good publisher, Dream Center Press, and their DSP publication. That's their imprint. I was lucky. When I went with DSP Publications, they gave me an option of several different types of covers and told me the artists who did them. And the one I picked was done by a lady by the name of Maria Fanning. And she did, I thought, a very good job for me on the Sosobra incident. So each time I've submitted a book, I've asked for her as my artist and so forth. They've accommodated me.
They're great. And the Bisti business I'm particularly interested in because it's set, for at least a lot of it is set in the town of Farmington.
Yes, a fair amount of it is. Yeah. That's one thing I do try to do. BJ is my protagonist, but I have a second protagonist, and that's the state of New Mexico.
That's right.
I try to showcase New Mexico. I'm born in Okie, but I got to heaven when I came here.
Yeah, the descriptions you talk about the Bisti Badlands are just amazing. And if anybody's been there and reads this, they'll see it for sure. It's almost like a moonscape.
It is. I've called it that a couple of times.
Maybe that's where I got that. Tell our audience a little bit about the plot of the Bisti business.
BJ is searching for the son of a wealthy California winery and vineyard owner. The son went missing in New Mexico while on a driving vacation with a friend. They're in a bright orange Porsche Boxster. And while he's tracing this very distinctive automobile across New Mexico, he becomes aware someone else is on the trail of the 2 missing college students. The trail leads to Taos, and I get to describe the Taos Gorge area, and then to Farmington. And by enlisting the aid of a very hip, gay Navajo mixed-blood teenager named Jazz Penrod and his older Navajo half-brother called Henry Secatero, both of whom, by the way, we meet in the 5th book, Abaddon's Locusts.
Oh, good.
Anyway, these two help BJ solve the mystery, and As I say, my adopted state in New Mexico is always a protagonist, and so I play up as much as I can the landscape. Some people tell me I put too much in, but
I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think so.
It is its own character in the books.
Yes.
And
yes.
Jazz, I have to say,
Good.
you mentioned Jazz. He is a great character.
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback from readers, and he and the across the street neighbor,
Right.
the elderly lady by the name of
yes.
Gertrude Wardlaw,
Yes.
who is a retired DEA agent,
Yes.
are the two favorites of all of them. My protagonist and his companion, they're all outshined by Jazz and Mrs. Wardlaw.
Oh, she's great too. I love her. Yes.
I found a way to put them together in the book, in the fifth book,
Oh, good.
Abaddon's Locusts.
I tell you what, that's going to be fun. Those two together, I can imagine. And while Vincent is solving crimes, he's trying to figure out his own love life.
He is he's openly gay, but he doesn't flaunt it.
Right.
He moves well in all societies, gay and straight, and that's because of his background. He played football. He was a Marine and
Right.
and an APD guy. So he's not an effeminate fellow.
Not at
but
all.
He's not overly masculine either. He's just an ordinary Joe.
Right.
He and this young man by the name of Paul Barton meet in the first book and have a bit of a rough go of it, but end up becoming companions.
Yeah, well, in Vincent's line of work and with everything that's happening in the books, he can't be sure he can trust anybody.
No, and that's the way it started off with Paul. He
That's
thought
right.
Paul was on the other side.
That's right.
This is a sober incident. But he was happily proved wrong, and it's worked out so far. They're going to hit a rough patch in the last book, and the one I'm doing now. But we'll see if they survive it or not.
Good. Well, it makes BJ a very well-rounded guy, smart guy, and yeah.
Thank you. I think he is.
Yeah, he's good. He's good. Do you have something that you can read for our audience?
Well, since you mentioned the descriptions of the Bisti, guess what? I picked out something that does just that. This starts on page 87 of the book.
Okay.
And BJ and one of the missing men's brother, who's come out from California to help look for him, on their way to the Bisti.
Okay.
To meet somebody who has, to meet a Navajo kid who has phone that belongs to one of the missing men. So they've offered to buy it from him, and that's where he wanted to meet, in the Bisti wilderness.
Right.
So here we go.
Okay.
About 40 miles south of Farmington, Aggie and I turned off Highway 371 onto a gravel road, which looped back north. 6 miles later, we parked on a stretch of ground that faintly resembled a parking lot. There were a bunch of tumble-down, rotting buildings. There were no other vehicles in sight. In fact, we appeared to be the only two people on the planet. You sure this is the right place? Aggie climbed out of the car and looked around. I nodded to a modest sign and what looked to be a register for tourists. According to that, it is. Man, this place is deserted. Yeah, they don't get much traffic out here. Hope we can find our way to the right place. Forewarned by Dixley and Lonzo Joe, we hoisted packs stuffed with water bottles, energy bars, and a compass. Feeling like I was provisioned for a week in the wilds, I clapped a broad-brimmed, floppy hat on my head as protection against the sun and glanced at Aggie. He looked a good deal more comfortable with the situation than I was, but then he would be. He hiked and climbed mountains and conquered deserts, more or less as a matter of course. We set off across the rocky ground, following the map Dix had sketched for us. She was supposed to be trailing along behind with someone from the Farmington BLM office. Almost immediately, we were swallowed up in a fantastic landscape. Not magnificent like the Grand Canyon, but spooky, weird, like a moonscape, mysterious, as if some omnipotent sculptor had capriciously balanced massive flat sandstone rocks atop slender necks of eroding clay in order to see how long they would stand. I wished Paul were here to share this with me. He'd be blown away by the pure craziness of the landscape. "Damn," Aggie said in a near whisper. "I've never seen anything like this. What the hell's keeping those damn rocks from toppling over?" He indicated one of the distant capped pink and gray striated clay towers, wearing what looked to be an outlandish stone beret at a rakish angle. I wonder what the good Lord was thinking when he did all of this. Probably did it to watch all of us stand around with our mouths open. We're almost averted from the gravity of our task by the multicolored stones, petrified stumps, washes filled with wacky shapes, and the silent, menacing hoodoos towering uncertainly over us. In one moment, our surroundings were whimsical. In another, ominous. The Navajo considered this sacred ground, and I could understand why. We trod foreign territory, or at least that's the way it felt. There were no footprints in the dry washes or anywhere in the stony ground we traveled, and I felt ours would disappear with our passing, as if we walked an alien planet subject to different natural laws. I glanced behind me to check and took false comfort when I saw my shoe prints still existed. We had barely started our trek, and already sweat was staining my shirt. Following Dix's hand-sketched map, we plodded on, taking frequent gulps of rapidly warming water, barely able to resist rushing off to explore some fascinating structural gem. Thin spires of sandstone rising toward the sky like some frozen tongue of flame. Piles of mudstone carved by wind and water into ugly, fascinating gargoyles. Specks of amber crystal winking in the hot sun, and those endless columns of sculpted, gravity-defying capped rock. Eventually we reached our target, a broad wash holding clusters of flattened, broken round rocks streaked with wind and water-carved wrinkles. I'd seen color prints of the cracked eggs, but the startling reality was greater than the image. The stones appeared to be gigantic dinosaur eggs, broken open and abandoned to the elements. Dozens and dozens of them. They weren't, of course. They were merely clay and stone fashioned by that same capricious hand. In the photos, they had appeared to be a dazzling array of color, influenced by the time of day, the intensity of the light, and influence of the clouds. Now, as the sun beat straight down upon us, they were flat gray with rosy highlights. Aggie looked around. "Don't see anyone with a cell phone for sale." I glanced at my watch. "It's early yet. Didn't take us long to find the place as we thought." "Uh-oh," Aggie nodded over my shoulder. I turned as 4 young men walked over a small rise and headed our direction. They fanned out, putting some distance between themselves as they neared. I'd seen gang members perform this maneuver 100 times. It was designed to intimidate more than anything else. This crew looked deceptively unthreatening despite fierce scowls. Young, 16 at the most, and one looked to be no more than 12. 3 were slender, 1 stocky. All were Native American, Navajo probably. They halted as a single unit 10 feet away from us. "Yo, you Vinson?" That was the stocky one. "That's me." I stepped over to offer a hand. "You Honcho?" "Yeah." He leaned forward at the waist to accept my shake. He kept his fingers straight, allowing me to do all the gripping. It's a class I find repulsive. There's no warmth, no return of camaraderie. "You got my money? You got our phone? The money's at the chapter house, as we agreed. You have Dana's phone?" "Dana, that the dude lost the phone?" "He's the one." Since Honcho obviously held little trust in or love for strangers, I tossed him the package I'd been carrying. He tore it open. "Cool, a razor." He held it up for his companions to admire. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and pitched a small silver fold-up cell to me. "Deal's a deal," he declared. "Show me where you found it." "Right over yonder," he pointed to the west. "Bottom of that hoodoo." It was just laying there in the sand. Almost stepped on it. Was it still working? Nah, battery was flat. My buddy's got a charger, and we got it going again. I turned the cell phone over in my hand. Any of the original messages left? Don't know. I didn't do nothing to them. Just started using the phone, man. Hopefully some of Dana's messages still remained in the phone's memory chip to give us a clue to what happened. It all depended upon how busy Hancho and his pals had been. These phones had a finite storage capacity. Okay, I said, show me exactly where you found the phone. Hancho led us 100 yards over rocky terrain and pointed to a spot where he'd claimed to have found the phone. He had done a little thinking and figured that he'd stumbled across it the previous Tuesday. I took out my calendar and noted that fact under August 21. I held up Dana's phone. I've been calling this number every day for a couple of weeks. How come you didn't answer it until yesterday? Already told you, man. Battery was dead. Just got it juiced up when you called. There was enough power in the new battery for Hancho to call the chapter house, and I dutifully instructed the woman on the other end to give the youngster his money when he came for it. The four kids took their leave, vanishing behind the nearest rock formation the moment Dix Lee showed up with a man in tow. I nodded in the direction of the retreating teens. Where did they come from? They're not headed for the parking lot, unless there's another one I don't know. No, Dix answered. There are 2 or 3 private Navajo holdings inside the wilderness. They probably belong to one of those. They're within walking distance. And that's why they stumbled on Lena's phone. I took another slug of water as she spoke and offered her some. She declined with the shape of her head. I wiped a sheen of sweat from my face with a sodden handkerchief. Probably. She turned to the man with her, blond and blue-eyed and handsome in the chiseled Fisher's way. He was J. Edgar Hoover's ideal agent, except he was Bureau of Land Management. BJ, this is Larry Planer, a special agent for the BLM. As I told you, they administer the Bisti Wilderness. Nice to meet you, I said, and introduced him to Aggie. I knew that the BLM had its own law enforcement arm, but didn't know exactly how they worked. Some rangers regularly carried firearms and handled criminal cases such as vandalism, theft, and the like. A special agent was new to me. Perhaps they handled the heavier crimes. Planer's fair features labeled him as an inside man, not a working ranger. Despite the heat, he wore navy dress pants and pale blue shirt, although he had foregone a coat and tie. A black baseball cap with the BLM stencil on it was all that protected him from the sun. He made me wonder how he had walked the same route I had without staining his clothing with sweat. I brought Dix and Planer up to date on the situation while Aggie wandered off somewhere on his own. A few minutes later, a shout attracted my attention. BJ, over here, Aggie yelled. I hurried over to a hoodoo, one of those sculpted toadstool formations that threatened to collapse momentarily. Aggie slowly walked the rocky ground back around the base as if searching for something. What is it? You smell anything? He asked. And then I caught a whiff of it, the faint, cloying, unmistakable stink of death.
Whoa.
That ends the chapter.
And that is a good chapter.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. That just starts things when they detect that smell there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Someone's dead now.
Someone's dead. Who is it?
Missing men? Is it one of the 2 missing men, or is it something totally unrelated?
And I love the way, we said before, the way it twists and turns and the surprise.
Then I accomplished my goal.
You did. You did. So of all your books, what is your favorite?
Well, of the B.J. Vinson books, my favorite is probably the 5th one, the one coming out next July, which features Jazz again and Mrs. Wardlow. It's a book about human trafficking, a lot of which takes place on the reservations. And the setting for that one is Albuquerque, and then we get to Farmington once, but a lot of time is spent on some of the smaller splinter reservations of the Navajos, like Alamo. But that, I think, has probably been my favorite one. I do something, and in that one I haven't done in any of the others. Now, all of the others are told from a single viewpoint, and that is BJ's viewpoint. So we're in his head all the time.
That's right.
In this one, I still tell it first person from BJ's standpoint, but then I have certain chapters where I switch to Jazz's head, told in third person, and it seems to work okay.
Oh, good. And what's the title of that one?
Abaddon's Locusts, Abaddon, apostrophe S, Locusts. And it's taken, Abaddon is taken from the book of Revelation in the Bible. He's one of the underworld lords, and he sends hordes of locusts, which aren't really locusts, but they're a scourge on the earth, bedevil mankind for 5 months. Why 5 months? Because that's probably because that's the lifespan of a normal locust.
Aha.
I equate the locusts with the young people that the kidnappers control and send out to make sexual contact with people on the street. They're the locusts.
I know that you said you were working on one book for quite a while. So have you been writing forever then?
Well, I was tubercular as a child, and I spent the summer between the first grade and the second grade in a sanitarium. And I really did not realize until late in life how much of an influence that was on me. I grew up in the library, not on the sports fields, because I grew up believing I couldn't do physical things. When I went in the Army, I found out I could do anything anybody else could, but it took me that long to recognize it.
Wow.
And so I've always been creative, but because I lived in the libraries, and spent all my spare time in libraries, I read. And, of course, if you read, then you get interested in writing.
Right.
And I was very interested in Native American cultures. So I would do little essays on them, gather information, and eventually I started writing little stories about them, none of which survived. They're all gone now, but that's how I got started. Then when I was older, as a matter of fact, came out of the Army, I started painting. So I did oil painting for a while and did okay. I sold everything that I ever painted, except I've got one hanging over my desk that was my mother's. When she passed away, I got it back. But that didn't scratch the itch the way writing did.
So what's your writing process?
Very disjointed. And today it's not the process that it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I'd sit down 5 hours at a stretch and write. I can no longer do that.
I understand
have to get
that.
up and do things, and as a result, it took me 9 months to write this last book, Voxleitner's scandal, the Voxleitner scandal, whereas I probably wrote most of the others in 4 and 5 months.
Wow.
Now, by writing, I mean doing the first draft.
Right.
There's a lot of writing to be done, as you well know, after the first draft.
It's true, yes. And there comes in the writers group that you talked about.
Yes, I attend. I'm a member of Southwest Writers, which is probably the biggest writing association in New Mexico. And I also, as a kind of a way of giving back, I teach a free writing class each Monday at North Domingo Baca Multi-Generational Center here in Albuquerque. So we meet for two hours every Monday, and we'll have 30 minutes of discussion about writing, and then for an hour and a half, we will read our own stuff and do class comments on it.
Oh, that's great.
About anywhere from 17 to 20 people who show up every time. Been doing that for 6 years now.
Well, good for you. I want our audience to know where they can find you on the web.
I have my... In the first place, I give my email address.
Okay.
I don't have any problem in doing that, and my email address is dontravis21@gmail.com.
Okay.
And I don't object to being contacted directly. My website is dontravis.com, And then I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/Donald.Travis982. And I have Twitter at Don Travis.
Okay, and your books are available.
They're available Amazon. They're available Barnes and Noble, I
Okay.
understand, and then always through Dreamcenter Press.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you, Don.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I have enjoyed it as well.
This is Tracy Hale-Sass, right on Four Corners, on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.